son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM.
Si il y a un restaurant haïtien qui respecte les normes internationales dans USA, il va l'autre que Cuisine La Caille Plus. Qui bla école dans 1672 Blue Hill Avenue Matapen. Toute prestation train dans Matapen Square. Un bel espace propre, sécurisé, climatisé. Depuis sous nom Cuisine La Caille Plus, nous déjà ouais manger au bon, c'est coupé douette, bouillon tête cabrit, du riz avec jonjon, pitimi, blé, maïs moulin, du riz collé, sauce pois, légumes, lambi. Bon banane, moi connais un pile nous te perdu goût bouche nous, mais grâce à Cuisine La Caille Plus, tout problème résoudre. Si l'ami, pas faire négligence, suspendre manger tente cap banou acide. Couille algérien votre nous dans Cuisine La Caille Plus. Téléphone 857 267 48 67.
Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM.
The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., December 18th, 2019. I hereby appoint the Honorable Diane DeGette to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
The prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Father Conroy.
Let us pray. Merciful God, we give you thanks for giving us another day. We pause in your presence and ask guidance for the men and women of the People's House. As the members take this time to consider far-reaching legislation and consider historic constitutional action, give them wisdom and discernment. Help them to realize that your constituency is wider and broader than ever we could measure or determine. Help them, and help us all, to put away any judgments that belong to you and do what we can to live together in harmony. Bless us this day and every day, and may all that is done be for your greater honor and glory. Amen.
Pursuant to Section 7A of House Resolution 758, the Journal of the Last Day's proceedings is approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Weber.
Please join me. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Leave a message.
Madam Speaker, a message from the President of the United States.
Madam Speaker,
Madam Secretary.
I'm directed by the President of the United States to deliver to the House of Representatives a message in writing.
Pursuant to Clause 4 of Rule 1, the following enrolled bill was signed by the Speaker on Tuesday, December 17, 2019.
H.R. 5363, a bill to reauthorize mandatory funding programs for historically black colleges and universities and other minority-serving institutions and for other purposes.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Arizona seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, so we can stop wasting America's time on impeachment, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Question is on the motion to adjourn. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed say no. No. The noes have it. The motion is not adopted.
The nays, please. Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Arizona.
Thank you. Ask for the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their vote by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
For just the third time in U.S. history, the U.S. House will likely vote today to impeach a president. 2 articles of impeachment facing President Donald Trump: abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Here's how we expect the day to lay out ahead of us. Coming up in the next several minutes or so, the House will undertake debate on the rule for how they're going to proceed today, the floor debate in the U.S. House. That rule debate expected to last an hour or so, so sometime between 10 and 11 they will vote on that rule. That rule allows for 6 hours of general debate, and we expect sometime between 6:30 and 7:30 there will be a vote on the 2 articles of impeachment. But a delaying measure here by Republicans on the impeachment debate, a motion to adjourn made by Republicans. And for some context to that, the chair of the Rules Committee yesterday, Jim McGovern, read a letter from Republicans that said, quote, "We will avail ourselves of every parliamentary tool available to us in committee and House floor to highlight your inaction, translated to try to delay and make this process as impossible as it can be made." That from Republicans read at the House committee meeting, the Rules meeting yesterday, by Jim McGovern. It's a 15-minute vote. We expect some more of these throughout the day here in our coverage on C-SPAN throughout the day as well. And as this vote continues, we'll bring you some comments from Republican leaders yesterday as the Rules Committee was wrapping up.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. We're obviously here on the eve of what is going to be a sad day, what's going to be a solemn day. And when we say that, we actually really mean it. We've heard the Democrats again and again and again talk about...
Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM.
Evidence, instructed witnesses not to answer Republican questions, used focus groups to decide what crime they should accuse the president of. And yet, despite all of these abuses, the Democrats have failed to prove their case. But they are continuing to proceed forward in what is a very partisan and reckless matter. Indeed, you heard a liberal constitutional law professor testify. This is not just a woefully inadequate basis for impeachment. In some respects, it is dangerous. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that you can impeach a president without direct evidence. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say that you can assume impeachable conduct. Nowhere in the Constitution does it say if you are angry at the president, or if you are angry at the opposing party, or you disagree with his policies, or you are afraid you can't beat him in the next election, that you can just assume impeachable conduct. Yet that's what the Democrats are doing. Tomorrow, they're going to bring articles of impeachment to the floor, articles of impeachment that have the potential to do grave damage to the Republic, to this House as an institution, to the Constitution, and to the voters all across this country who believe rightly that the decision about who sits in the White House should be theirs, not Nancy Pelosi's, not Adam Schiff's, certainly who do not agree with and do not believe in the kind of partisan process we're going to see tomorrow. We in the House Republican Conference are going to remain united. We're going to continue to stand up for the Constitution. We're going to continue to stand up for the rule of law. And we are going to look forward to the day when we are back in the majority. And we certainly are not going to commit the kind of offenses to the Constitution and abuse of power that the Democrats have been engaged in now ever since they took over. With that, I will turn things over to our whip, Mr. Scalise.
Thank you, Liz. Tomorrow's impeachment vote will be a stain on Nancy Pelosi's legacy as Speaker. From the very beginning, you could see that this was more about settling a political score, a personal vendetta against President Trump, where the most radical elements of Speaker Pelosi's base called for impeachment before he even took the oath of office. And so instead of searching for facts, which, by the way, tomorrow will mark the first time in our country's history where a president was impeached on a party line vote. Never before has that been done. In fact, the only bipartisan vote tomorrow will be against impeachment. And so instead of starting with a crime, which is what the case was with Andrew Johnson's impeachment, with Richard Nixon's impeachment, and with Bill Clinton's impeachment, they all started with a specific crime and then ultimately went through their inquiries and moved to impeachment. That's never been the case here. There was never a crime. It was an impeachment in search of a crime, meandering around as a witch hunt trying to find something wrong, starting with the Mueller investigation. They kept promising, and you remember Schiff's statements. He promised that he had more than circumstantial evidence that there was collusion with the president and Russia. And then the Mueller report comes out, and in fact, there was no collusion. And instead of just ending it there, they kept going on. And then there was a whistleblower report, and we heard all the salacious allegations against the president. And none of those turned out to be the case. In fact, every single witness that came before the committees of jurisdiction, when they were asked point blank, under oath to witnesses, can you name an impeachable offense? Not one. Can you name any bribery? Not one. And again, at that point, you would have thought maybe cooler minds would prevail, and they would move on to actually working to solve the problems that people across this country face. When there was a unanimous bill that came out of committee to lower drug prices, literally a layup waiting to be sent to the president's desk, where every Republican and every Democrat on the committee of jurisdiction voted to lower drug prices and to bring generics to market quicker so that families could be paying less today for their drugs at home, which is a major problem. They wouldn't bring that bill to the floor because they were so fixated with impeachment. And so this obsession continued, and it's going to play itself out tomorrow. And it's going to be a sad day. But again, when you look throughout history, when they focused on the facts, those were the times that they produced bipartisan votes. The facts here have strongly supported the president. The Zelensky call, you asked Zelensky, and he said he appreciated the phone call. He actually got Javelin missiles that he was able to buy that President Trump sold him to stand up to Russia that President Obama and Joe Biden wouldn't sell. Why wouldn't President Obama and Joe Biden sell missiles to Ukraine so they could stand up to Russia and Putin? I don't know. It's a good question that they should be asked. But President Trump did. In his first year, he sold those Javelin missiles. There was no exchange of any quid pro quo. There was no investigation. He did it because it was the right thing to do, and he was stood by an ally. And President Zelensky thanked him for that. In fact, when asked, President Zelensky said there was no pressure on the phone call. He got the aid, and ultimately there was no investigation, and yet they still march on. Not because they found any facts or evidence, but because they've been wanting to score a political and personal vendetta against the president that started well before the phone call. Before the phone call, over 100 Democrats voted to impeach this president. Before the phone call. In fact, there was one article of impeachment that we forced a vote on, that they were trying to impeach the president because he criticized NFL players for kneeling during the Pledge of Allegiance. Over 50 Democrats voted to impeach the president of the United States for that. Now, do people across the country think that meets the constitutional standard of treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors? Of course not. Doesn't pass the smell test, but it shows that this has been a personal vendetta against the president, not a fact-finding mission in search of an impeachable offense, because there was no impeachable offense. So we're going to continue doing our work. We're going to work hard to pass USMCA so we can have a better trade deal with our friends Canada and Mexico, and then work to get better deals with other countries around the world, and then focus our efforts on holding China accountable. And I'm glad that President Trump continues to work for the American people, the families that he fought for, the forgotten men and women of this country that had been left behind. President Trump is still fighting for them, even while Pelosi is wasting her majority on trying to score personal vendetta points. With that, now I yield to our Republican leader, Kevin McCarthy.
Thank you, Steve. In less than 24 hours, House Democrats will officially push through the weakest, thinnest, and fastest impeachment in American history. Their entire majority, the legacy of the 116th Congress, will be defined by their hatred for President Trump and their deep-rooted desire to oust him from office. What we found with the Speaker just a week ago, she finally admitted she'd been trying to impeach him for nearly 3 years. We watched today with Congressman Raskin, who today presented the Democrats' case at the hearing. He is on records 2 days before the inaugural, and he said, "I want to say this about Donald Trump, who I may very well be voting to impeach over the next year or two." Or from the committee that impeachment moved through, Chairman Nadler. New York Times writes that Chairman Nadler campaigned to his Democrat colleagues to win the chairmanship based upon he would be the best to impeach. Or to the freshman Democrats who gave the Democrats their majority, Congresswoman Tele, who on the night of swearing in, a few hours after she raised her hand to uphold the Constitution, she said she was going to impeach the mother. This will be their legacy, but it will not be a legacy that we want to have repeated. Alexander Hamilton warned us of this day. Unfortunately, this day has come, where individuals purely for political reasons, with no facts, move forward with impeachment. Why we see this today, we also hear from a FISA judge questioning the FBI to prove what they have used the FISA courts for. And to think they turned the Intel Committee over to an impeachment committee. And you have Adam Schiff as a chairman who defended FISA and lied again to the American public. We know what this outcome will be. Speaker Pelosi promised they would be different. She said she'd have an agenda for the people that she put aside to show her real agenda for the last 3 years of impeaching the president. I truly believe, regardless, you're supposed to represent the people, not your hatred. We can do so much better. Questions? Yes, sir.
How hard did you have to whip your members to be united in opposition?
Not hard at all. Yes.
Congressman Van Drew announced over the weekend, or reportedly announced over the weekend, switching to the Republican Party. What's your reaction to his decision to switch sides, and have you talked to other Republicans in Jersey to try to clearly get for him to run as a Republican in 2020?
I think Congressman Van Drew will make a public announcement sometime soon, whatever he decides to do. But I don't blame Congressman Van Drew for being disappointed in the Democrats. American public is disappointed.
Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio. FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM.
The motion is not adopted. House will be in order.
Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM.
Madam Speaker, I rise to question the privilege of the House and send to the desk a privileged resolution.
Clerk will report the resolution.
Whereas Chairman Schiff and Chairman Nadler willfully and intentionally violated the rules of the House of Representatives by abusing and
Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM.
President Zelensky.
Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM.
Concurrence of the chair to issue certain subpoenas. Whereas on November 20th, 2019, after excusing the witnesses at an open hearing and without prior notice to the Republicans on the committee, chairmanship announced that the committee had a business
Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM.
request concerning certain subpoenas. Whereas on November 20th, 2019, chairmanship violated Clause 2G3 of Rule 11 of the Rules of the House of Representatives, which states, the chair of a committee shall announce the date, place, and subject matter of a committee meeting, which may not commence earlier than the third calendar day on which members have notice thereof.
The clerk shall suspend. The House will come to order. Clerk may continue.
Whereas on November 20th, 2019, chairmanship's action further violated paragraph 4B of House Resolution 660, which states, in the case that the chair declines to concur in a proposed action of the ranking minority member, the ranking minority member shall have the right to refer to the committee for decision the question whether such authority shall be so exercised, and the chair shall convene the committee promptly to render that decision, subject to the notice procedures for a committee meeting under Clause 2G, 3A, and B of Rule 11. Whereas on November 21st, 2019, pursuant to Clause 2J1 of Rule 11 of the Rules of the House of Representatives, all Republican members on the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence wrote to Chairman Schiff demanding to call witnesses at a minority day of hearings. Whereas subsequent to receiving the request for an additional day of hearings by members of the minority party, Chairman Schiff refused to schedule such hearings. Whereas on December 6, 2019, Chairman Schiff, without consultation of the ranking minority member, in violation of Section 3 of House Resolution 660, unilaterally transmitted additional records and other materials to the Committee on the Judiciary. Whereas Chairman Schiff compelled the production of documents from AT&T and Verizon, and in violation of Clause 2K6 of Rule 11 of the Rules of the House of Representatives, publicly used these documents to smear the personal attorneys of the President, a journalist, and to create a false narrative about a sitting member of Congress and current and former congressional staff. Whereas on multiple occasions in both closed-door depositions and public hearings, Chairman Schiff abused his power as chair by unilaterally restricting Republican lines of questions and supporting witnesses' attempts to evade answering Republicans or the minorities' questions by directing witnesses not to answer certain questions from Republican members and staff. Whereas on multiple occasions in both closed-door depositions and public hearings, Chairman Schiff abused his power as chair by failing to follow proper parliamentary procedure, failing to recognize members who wished to raise valid points of order, and repeatedly interrupting Republican members and staff when they were controlling the time. Whereas at the House Judiciary Committee's first hearing pursuant to House Resolution 660, on December 4, 2019, Chairman Nadler was furnished with a request for a minority day of hearings pursuant to Clause 2J1 of Rule 11 of the Rules of the House of Representatives, signed by all Republican members of the committee. Whereas subsequent to receiving the request for an additional day of hearings by members of the minority party, Chairman Nadler refused to schedule such hearings. Whereas Ranking Minority Member Collins furnished Chairman Nadler with a letter reminding him of his obligation to schedule a minority day of hearings as requested by members of the minority party, and Chairman Nadler ignored the letter and failed to respond. Whereas Chairman Nadler repeatedly misstated the rules, misguiding members of the committee and the American people, and refused to rule properly on members' points of order concerning the requested minority hearing day. Whereas Chairman Nadler refused to consider the scheduling of the minority hearing day during a committee meeting until the markup of articles of impeachment. Whereas in place of finding common ground with the minority, Chairman Schiff and Chairman Nadler have constantly disregarded the rules of the House of Representatives and ignored the fundamental rights of the minority. And whereas Chairman Schiff's and Chairman Nadler's actions and abuses of power as chairman of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence and the Committee on the Judiciary have willfully trampled on the rights of the minority in violation of the rules of the House of Representatives and brought dishonor and discredit upon the House of Representatives. Now therefore be it resolved that 1, the House of Representatives strongly condemns Chairman Adam B. Schiff for repeated and blatant abuse of power in a way that is not befitting an elected member of the House of Representatives nor his position as chairman, and 2, the House of Representatives strongly condemns the manner in which Chairman Gerald Lewis Nadler has failed to respond to the minority's request for an additional day of hearings to consider impeachment of President Donald John Trump.
For what purpose does the gentleman? The resolution qualifies. For what purpose does the gentleman from Maryland rise?
Madam Chair, I have a motion at the desk.
Clerk will report the motion.
Mr. Hoyer of Maryland moves to lay the resolution on the table.
Questions on the motion to table? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it. Gentleman from California.
Madam Speaker, I request a recorded vote.
Recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will rise. A sufficient number having risen, a recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This will be a 15-minute vote.
Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM. Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans. Le son pur de Radio Pure FM.
This vote, the yeas are 226, the nays are 191. The motion is not adopted, or the motion is adopted. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. The gentleman, Massachusetts, rise.
Madam Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 767 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Support the resolution.
House Calendar Number 63, House Resolution 767, resolved that immediately upon adoption of this resolution, without intervention of any point of order, the House shall proceed to the consideration of the House of the resolution, House Resolution 755, impeaching Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. The amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on the Judiciary, now printed in the resolution, shall be considered as adopted. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the resolution as amended to adoption without intervening motion or demand for division of the question, except as follows. A. The resolution as amended shall be debatable for 6 hours, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary or their respective designees. B. The question of adoption of the resolution as amended shall be divided between the two articles. Section 2. During consideration of House Resolution 755, only the following persons shall be admitted to the hall of the House or rooms leading thereto. A. Members of Congress. B. The delegates and the resident commissioner. C. The President and Vice President of the United States. D. Other persons as designated by the Speaker. Section 3. After adoption of House Resolution 755, it shall be in order without intervention of any point of order to consider in the House a resolution appointing and authorizing managers for the impeachment trial of Donald John Trump, President of the United States, if offered by the chair of the Committee on the Judiciary or his designee. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the resolution to adoption without intervening motion or demand for division of the question, except 10 minutes of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary. No other resolution incidental to impeachment relating to House Resolution 755 shall be privileged during the remainder of the 116th Congress. Section 4. The chair of the Committee on the Judiciary may insert in the congressional record such material as he may deem explanatory of A. House Resolution 755, not later than the date, that is 5 legislative days after adoption thereof, and B. The resolution specified in Section 3 of this resolution, not later than the date, that is 5 legislative days after adoption thereof.
Does the gentleman from Louisiana seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I raise a point of order against H.Res. 767 for failure.
The gentleman's point of order.
I raise this point of order for failure to disclose the waiver clause 2J1 of Rule 11 pursuant to Clause 6G of Rule 13, which requires the Rules Committee to specify their report any waiver of a point of order against a measure under consideration. And Madam Speaker, this underlying resolution violates Clause 2J1 of Rule 11, which entitles the minority of the committee to have the ability to call witnesses to testify during at least one day of a hearing on any given measure. This was not afforded to the Judiciary Committee minority members during consideration of the articles of impeachment, despite numerous requests by the minority's members. Therefore, I raise a point of order against consideration of the rule and the underlying resolution for the violation of minority rights and the denial of this evidence to be put into the record and for this hearing, which the House rules require, which was not complied with and was denied. I would urge the enforcement of this rule.
The gentleman from Louisiana seeks to raise a point of order against House Resolution 767 on the grounds that the report accompanying the resolution fails to specify a waiver of a particular point of order and is thus in violation of Clause 6G of Rule 13. The gentleman is stating a matter for debate rather than a proper point of order. Clause 6G of Rule 13 is merely informational on any specified waivers, quote, to the maximum extent possible. As elucidated by Chairman Solomon in the legislative history accompanying the adoption of this rule in the 104th Congress, any, quote, failure of the Rules Committee to specify waivers in a rule would not give rise to a point of order against a special rule that waives all points of order, end quote. The Chair would therefore advise the gentleman again that he is not stating a proper point of order. Massachusetts is recognized.
Madam Speaker,
gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized.
Madam Speaker, for the purposes of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to the distinguished gentleman from Oklahoma, my good friend Mr. Cole, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume. During consideration of this resolution, all time is yielded for the purposes of debate only. I ask unanimous consent that all members be given 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, on Tuesday, the Rules Committee met and reported a closed roll for House Resolution 767, providing for consideration of House H.Res. 755, impeaching Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. The rule provides 6 hours of debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Judiciary Committee or their designees. The rule provides that the question of adoption of the resolution shall be divided between 2 articles. The rule limits access to the House floor. It provides at any time after adoption of H.Res. 755 for consideration of a resolution appointing and authorizing managers for the impeachment trial, if offered by the chair of the Judiciary Committee, debatable for 10 minutes. No resolution incidental to impeachment relating to H.Res. 755 shall be privileged during the remainder of the 116th Congress. Finally, the rule provides that the chair of the Judiciary Committee may insert explanatory material in the congressional record. Madam Speaker, 232 years ago, as he walked out of the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, Benjamin Franklin stated that the founders had just created a republic if you can keep it. He understood that nothing was preordained, that our nation would continue to be shaped decision by decision, vote by vote, not by some other leaders in some other time, but day in and day out, both through the regular work of government and during historic moments like the one we face today. Our founders crafted the fundamentals of government to guide us. Passages like Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, giving this chamber the sole power of impeachment. But nowhere does it list exactly what constitutes a high crime or misdemeanor. In their wisdom, the founders understood they could not anticipate what the future would bring. They gave subsequent generations, us, the chance to decide precisely what our government would become, to decide with each passing day what a nation defined by the rule of law, to decide with each passing day what a nation defined by the rule of law was willing to tolerate. That is what brings us here today, to decide nearly 2.5 centuries later whether the United States is still a nation where no one is above the law, or whether America becomes a land run by those who act more like kings or queens, as if the law doesn't apply to them. Yes, Madam Speaker, this really is that serious. Over the past several months, the House of Representatives has been conducting an impeachment inquiry into the 45th President of the United States, Donald John Trump. Our inquiry is simply to answer the following question. Did President Trump and his top advisors corruptly withhold official government actions to obtain an improper advantage in the next election? We now know through the hard work of our investigative committees and because of the President's own admission that the answer to that question is yes. The President withheld congressionally approved military aid to Ukraine, a country under siege, not to fight corruption, but to extract a personal political favor. President Trump refused to meet with Ukraine's president in the White House until he completed this scheme. All the while, leaders in Russia, the very nation holding a large part of Ukraine hostage, the very nation that interfered with our elections, had another meeting in the Oval Office just last week. The President of the United States endangered our national security. The President undermined our democracy. And the President, a successor to the same office as George Washington and Abraham Lincoln, betrayed his oath to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. These aren't opinions. These are uncontested facts. Now, I've read the details of the July 25th phone call with President Zelensky, where President Trump said, "I would like you to do us a favor, though." I've seen the televised press conference where his chief of staff openly admitted to this deal and told the nation to just get over it. Hours and hours of depositions by the Intelligence, Oversight, and Foreign Affairs Committees have been conducted, where witnesses outlined the President's direct involvement in this scheme. The evidence is as clear as it is overwhelming. If a president undermining our national security and using the federal government for his own selfish personal gain is not impeachable conduct, then, Madam Speaker, I don't know what is. Now, I've heard some on the other side suggest this process is about overturning an election. That is absurd. This is about protecting our democracy. These facts are beyond dispute. The only question now is whether we are willing to tolerate such conduct, not just today by President Trump, but furthermore by any president of either party. To not act would set a dangerous precedent, not just for this president, but for every future president. You know, 11 months ago, many of us took an oath right here in this chamber. I've had the privilege to take that oath 12 times now, and I believe it is not just for show. It is a contract between each of us and the people we represent to place the national interest above partisan interests and to preserve those laws that make our country unique. We cannot reconcile the President's abuse of power and obstruction of Congress with the oath of office that we took. Madam Speaker, we are being tested on something greater than our ability to toe a party line, something more than our ability to score the next great television soundbite. This is a democracy-defining moment. History will judge us by whether we keep intact that fragile republic handed down to us by our forebears more than 200 years ago, or whether we allow it to be changed forever. For the sake of our country's future, I hope and I pray that my colleagues will make the right decision. I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Son pur de radio, pur FM. Le son pur, c'est sur Radio Pure FM.
Nor an open or fair process. Instead, it's going to be a deeply partisan vote coming at the end of an unfair and rushed process prescribed solely by Democrats to ensure a predetermined result. Impeachment of a president is one of the most consequential acts the House of Representatives can undertake, and it should only be done after the fullest and most careful consideration. Yet today, after a truncated investigation that denied the president due process, cherry-picked evidence, and witness testimony to fit their narrative and trampled on Republicans' minority rights, Democrats in the House are pressing forward with a partisan impeachment vote. Doing so contradicts Speaker Pelosi's own words back in March of this year, when she said that, quote, "An impeachment is so divisive to the country that unless there's something so compelling and overwhelming and bipartisan, I don't think we should go down that path because it divides the country," unquote. But if we're really being honest, Democrats have been searching for a reason to impeach President Trump since the day he was elected. In December of 2017, a current member of the majority forced a vote to impeach the president, and even then, long before there was even an impeachment investigation, 58 Democrats voted to impeach the president. And those members have only grown since then, to the point where the majority is now pushing forward with a final vote on impeachment, heedless of where it takes the country and regardless of whether or not they've proven their case. And if my colleagues in the majority believe they have proven their case, let me be clear, they have not. The entire premise of these articles of impeachment rests on a pause placed on Ukrainian security assistance, a pause of 55 days. The majority has spun creative narratives as to the meaning and the motive of this pause, alleging the president demanded a, quote, quid pro quo, unquote, but with no factual evidence to back it up. Security aid to the Ukraine was released. The administration did so without the Ukraine ever initiating an investigation into anyone or anything. It's even more startling to me that the majority wants to move forward with this resolution, given how substantially flawed and procedurally defective the entire process has been. The Judiciary Committee, which drafted these articles of impeachment, engaged in an abbreviated process, hearing from no witnesses with firsthand knowledge of the events in question. They did not conduct their own investigation and only held 2 hearings on this topic before drafting the articles, one with staff and one with constitutional law scholars. That's hardly the type of lengthy and serious consideration a topic as grave as impeachment demands. The committee actually charged with an impeachment investigation was the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence, not the Judiciary Committee. But that committee, too, followed a primarily closed process. Republicans were denied the right to call witnesses or subpoena documents, and the president was denied the right to representation in the committee's hearings. Without respecting minority rights and without respecting due process rights of the president, how can anyone consider this a fair process? Madam Speaker, it gets worse. The articles of impeachment we are considering today are based on the Shift Report, the final document produced by the Intelligence Committee and transmitted to the Judiciary Committee. But the Shift Report includes unsubstantiated allegations. It includes, in some cases, news reports as the only evidence supporting so-called factual assertions, and it includes at least 54 different hearsay statements as assertions of evidence without any firsthand information from witnesses to corroborate those statements. The author of the report, Chairman Schiff, was never questioned by the Judiciary Committee, and he refused to sit for questions or to explain how his committee conducted its investigation. In fact, during the staff presentation of evidence at the Judiciary Committee, Ranking Member Collins asked how the investigation was conducted that resulted in the drafting of the Shift Report, but he never received an answer. During the Rules Committee consideration of House Resolution 755, there were numerous times when the members on both sides of the aisle posed questions to our witnesses, questions they could not answer because they sit on the Judiciary Committee and were not the author of the report that brought about H.Res. 755. The author has never appeared before members of the minority to explain a single thing in the report or to provide factual information supporting the many assertions it contains. Madam Speaker, this is no way to go about impeaching the President of the United States. The articles before us are based on very limited information. They are based on hearsay, on news reports, and on other unsupported allegations. They are based on a report written by a member of Congress who refused to answer questions about it. And I do not believe the allegations, which are subject to interpretation, actually rise to the level of an impeachable offense. To make matters worse, when Republicans attempted to exercise one of their rights under House rules, they were shut down by Chairman Nadler. Under Clause 2J1 of Rule 11, the minority is allowed to demand a minority hearing day. On December 4th, the Republicans on the Judiciary Committee properly exercised that right and transmitted a demand to Chairman Nadler for a hearing day at which the minority could call their own witnesses. And to be clear, Madam Speaker, a minority hearing day is not subject to the chair's discretion. It is a right, and Republicans on the Judiciary Committee properly demanded the exercise of that right. And yet, Chairman Nadler declined to allow a minority hearing day to be held before the voting of these articles. I think we can all agree that it would have been better for the institution and for the American people to allow all voices to be heard and all witnesses to be questioned before proceeding to a vote on something as this consequential. And yet the majority trampled on that right. But I suppose I should not be surprised by any of this. When the House passed H.Res. 660, the resolution setting up the official impeachment inquiry less than 2 months ago, I warned that the House that the majority was doing was setting up a closed, unfair process that could only have one outcome. And today, we are seeing the end result of this closed and unfair process. A quick rush to judgment forced through not one but two committees in short order, with minority rights trampled, witnesses left unquestioned, and due process ignored. It is also disappointing that members are not being given more time to debate this issue on the floor. Last night at Rules Committee, I offered an amendment to double the amount of floor time debate from 6 to 12 hours. This would have allowed for roughly the same amount of debate time used in the Clinton impeachment, and it would have ensured that all members could have the opportunity to speak on the floor. Unfortunately, that amendment was not accepted. While I know my friend Chairman McGovern did the best he could, I do think it's ironic that when all is said and done, the 13 members of the Rules Committee spent more time discussing H.Res. 755 in committee yesterday than we will spend debating it on the House floor for every member today. I think that's a disservice to the members of this body and to the American people. Madam Speaker, we deserve better than a flawed process that led to this flawed outcome. The House of Representatives deserves better than that. The President certainly deserves better than that. More importantly, the American people deserve better than what we're doing here today. I oppose proceeding any further. I oppose the rule. I oppose this limited and unfair process, and I certainly oppose impeaching the President of the United States. With that, I urge opposition to the rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to ask unanimous consent. I want to insert in the record a statement, a letter that I sent with regard to the Members' Day. I want to correct. I think it's important to correct the record. There were 0 points of order that lie against H.Res. 755.
Without objection, so ordered.
And Madam Speaker, I want to yield myself 30 seconds.
Gentleman's recognized.
Yeah, we're here to talk about the President's behavior, and that's what I think we all should be focused on, not just process. But I want to just say that I'm proud of the process. Democrats and Republicans have had equal opportunity to participate in the months-long impeachment inquiry. Members of both parties have been involved at every stage of this process, from sitting in and asking questions in closed-door depositions to questioning witnesses in open hearings. The committees took more than 100 hours of deposition testimony from 17 witnesses and held 7 public hearings, which included Republican-requested witnesses. They produced a 300-page public report that laid out their findings and evidence. The Judiciary Committee then took that report and conducted 2 public hearings evaluating the evidence and the legal standard for impeachment before reporting out the 2 articles.
Gentleman's time's expired.
I yield myself an additional 15 seconds.
Gentleman's recognized.
President Trump was given the opportunity to participate in the Judiciary Committee's review of the evidence presented against him. He chose not to participate, and President Trump to date has not provided any exculpatory evidence, but instead has blocked numerous witnesses from testifying about his actions. At this point, Madam Speaker, I would like to yield 3 minutes to the gentleman from South Carolina, the Majority Whip, Mr. Clyburn.
Gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes. Yes.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I thank the gentleman for yielding me the time. Madam Speaker, I rise today feeling the full weight of my duty as a member of this august body, reflecting upon our oath of office to support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. It is my sincere belief that under the circumstances that bring us here today, there is only one path for us to take to fulfill that oath. Thomas Paine, in this first of a series of pamphlets entitled The American Crisis, published 243 years ago tomorrow, intoned that these are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldiers and sunshine patriots will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. But he that stands by it now deserves the love and thanks of man and woman. Tyranny, like hell, is not easily conquered. These words were written at a time when our founders were rebelling against the tyrannical rule of the British monarchy. Today, we have a president who seems to believe he is a king or above the law. Paine warned us that so unlimited a power can belong only to God Almighty. My faith leads me to take very seriously the final words of our oath to faithfully discharge the duties of the office, so help me God. Madam Speaker, 3 days ago, I joined with a bipartisan delegation of our colleagues celebrating the 75th anniversary of the Battle of the Bulge. We laid wreaths at the memorials of Generals George Patton and Anthony McCullough. We visited foxholes that were occupied by some brave soldiers who fought in some of the worst winter weather ever visited upon a battlefield. And we visited the Luxembourg American Cemetery, the final resting place of thousands of them and General George Patton. They were not summer soldiers in their efforts 75 years ago to preserve the Republic, and we must not be sunshine patriots today in our efforts to protect the Constitution upon which this great Republic stands. While our fight is not in the trenches of battlefields, but in the hallowed halls of this Congress, our duty is no less patriotic. And I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield myself 15 seconds just to respond to my
Gentleman is
friend.
recognized.
President Trump, for the record, was not provided the opportunity to challenge the facts and still has not received the materials from the judiciary as required by H.Res. 660. Another example of why this isn't a fair process. With that, Madam Speaker, I would like to yield to the gentlelady from Wyoming, the distinguished chairman of the Republican Conference, for the purpose of a unanimous consent request.
Madam Speaker, Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to amend H.Res. 767 to provide for voting by a manual call of the roll, so the American people can see precisely who is supporting the impeachment of a duly elected president. Members should be required to stand and identify themselves openly and on camera on the question of adoption of these articles of impeachment.
All time has been yielded for the purpose of debate by the gentleman from Massachusetts. Does the gentleman from Massachusetts yield for this unanimous consent request?
I do not.
Gentleman from Massachusetts does not yield. Therefore, the unanimous consent request cannot be entertained. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I yield to my good friend, the gentleman from Missouri, the distinguished Secretary of the Republican Conference, for purpose of a unanimous consent request.
Gentleman shall state his request.
Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Speaker, Madam Speaker, I ask for unanimous consent to amend H.R. 767 to provide for 12 hours of debate equally divided by the majority and the minority, which would allow each member of the House at least 1 minute and 40 seconds of debate, as opposed to currently 50 seconds. The people's representatives deserve the right of more than 50 seconds to be heard in this important matter.
All time has been yielded, as I said, for the purpose of debate by the gentleman from Massachusetts. Does the gentleman from Massachusetts yield for this unanimous consent request? The gentleman from Massachusetts does not yield. Therefore, this unanimous consent request cannot be entertained. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I want to yield 4 minutes to my good friend, the distinguished member of both the Energy and Commerce Committee and the House Rules Committee, Dr. Burgess of the great state of Texas.
Gentleman's recognized for 4 minutes.
And I thank the gentleman for yielding. Madam Speaker, yesterday the Rules Committee spent 8 hours considering whether to bring H.Res. 755, the Articles of Impeachment, to the House floor. Given the 4-to-9 ratio of Republicans to Democrats on the committee, it is no surprise that we are now considering the articles before us. Despite robust debate on the so-called facts derived from the impeachment investigation and the process by which they were obtained, Democrats and Republicans remain in opposition to each other on our conclusions. As outlined yesterday by Ranking Member Collins and several members of the Rules Committee through direct quotes, some Democrats have been seeking President Trump's impeachment since his inauguration. The rush to impeach first and solidify the case second threatens the credibility of the process and threatens the credibility of the body engaged, this very House of Representatives. In fact, it's been quoted before and he'll be quoted again today, I suspect. Chairman Nadler recognized the gravity of impeachment when he stated in December of 1998, quoting here, "The effect of impeachment is to overturn the popular will of the voters as expressed in a national election. There must never be a narrowly voted impeachment or an impeachment substantially supported by one of our major political parties and largely opposed by the other. Such an impeachment would lack legitimacy and produce divisiveness and bitterness in our politics for years to come, and will call into question the very legitimacy of our political institutions." End quote. Well, on October 31st, this House voted to authorize the official impeachment investigation in H.Res. 660. The process outlined in H.Res. 660 did not include the robust minority protections afforded the minority party in previous impeachment investigations. Even more concerning, Chairman Nadler, Chairman Schiff refused to comply with the very rules of the House in granting access to committee records for members and scheduling a minority hearing in a reasonable amount of time, thus preventing the American people from being equally represented in the process. Refusing to allow members to access their own records. These are records of members of the House of Representatives, and we were not allowed to access these records obtained down in secret under armed guard in the Intelligence Committee, but it's required under Section 2E of Rule 11, and they've denied members the ability to do their job. The Judiciary Committee did not hear testimony from even one fact witness, not even one, after they received a deluge of materials from the Intelligence Committee. This reversal of responsibility is indeed unprecedented. But turning to the case upon which the argument is based, we had a whistleblower. Not a fact witness, a whistleblower who never appeared before any member of Congress that we know of, a whistleblower complaint concerning a congratulatory call between President Trump and President Zelensky of the Ukraine. The whistleblower is known to have had contact with Chairman Schiff's staff, while Republicans were denied any contact. The whistleblower complaint is not based on first-hand knowledge, and the call transcript that was to support impeachment reveals nothing more than a congratulatory phone call. Look, a request for investigation as to how American foreign aid will be spent does not does not equal soliciting election interference. The evidence brought before us does not amount to a high crime. Indeed, it does not amount to any crime. Democrats claim that we must protect the integrity of our election. Look, if you really cared, then I have to ask, what are we missing while we've been focused on impeachment? We tied up the Intelligence Committee, we tied up the Judiciary Committee, and oh, by the way, the Ways and Means Committee had to give up their room. They couldn't even meet while you were doing all of this. So this impeachment investigation is being painted as a protection against future interference, when in reality, President Trump's request looks back at the 2016 election. Russia is the winner in this exchange because they have disrupted the process.
Expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Madam Speaker, the gentleman is passionate about records. I should remind him that we've gotten no records from this White House, not a single document. At this time, I'd like to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentlewoman from Florida, a distinguished member of the Rules Committee, Ms. Shalala.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I come to impeachment with deep sadness. The facts of this case are painful and indisputable. We know that the President illegally held up congressionally appropriated aid to the Ukraine. We know that he conditioned the release of this aid on Ukrainian President Zelensky's opening an investigation based on a debunked conspiracy theory about his political rival and foreign interference in the 2016 election. We also know that the President has actively blocked congressional attempts to determine the extent of his misconduct by ordering executive branch officials to defy subpoenas and withhold information. Despite the unprecedented obstruction from the President, the evidence in this case is powerful enough that to delay this vote any further would risk interference in the 2020 election and the permanent erosion of our system of checks and balances. Madam Speaker, this is not a matter of politics. This is a matter of protecting the integrity of our democracy for the next generation. As we labor to pass on to future generations many of the great hallmarks of our society, we must also work with active stewardship and vigilance to pass on a vibrant and functional democracy. If we don't do our duty to protect the Constitution, the republic that we hand to our children will be less vibrant. If we do not do our duty to protect the Constitution, the republic that we hand to our children will be less resilient and less effective.
Gentlelady's time's expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I yield 4 minutes to my very good friend and fellow member of the Rules Committee and of the Judiciary Committee, the gentlelady from Arizona, Ms. Lesko.
Gentlelady is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Cole, for yielding me the time. Madam Speaker, you know, God takes us on journeys in our life, and about 30 years ago, I was married to an abusive ex-husband. And when I finally left him, there were times in my life I had no money and no place to live. And I tell you what, I never dreamed in a million years that I would be standing here today as a congresswoman in the United States House of Representatives. And I tell you what, I never would have believed that I would be standing here talking about impeachment of a president of the United States. I serve on the Judiciary Committee. I also serve on the Rules Committee. I have spent hours and hours and hours reading transcripts, looking at documents, hearing testimony. And I can tell you one thing. I believe this is the most unfair, politically biased, rigged process that I have seen in my entire life. Here are the facts. There is no proof, none, that the President has committed an impeachable offense. Not one of the Democrat witnesses, not one, was able to establish that the President committed bribery, treason, or high crimes and misdemeanors as required in the U.S. Constitution. And as I've said before, the Democrats are really undermining their own argument here, because 17 out of the 24 Democrat members on the Judiciary Committee voted here on this floor to move forward articles of impeachment on July 17th of this year, before President Trump's call even took place. And 5 out of the 9 Rules Committee members that are Democrats did the same thing. So if your argument is that this phone call is the main reason for this impeachable offense, why did you vote for impeachment, moving impeachment forward before the call even took place? The process has been rigged from the start. Other members have told you. I mean, never in the history of the United States have we had impeachment that's gone through the Intelligence Committee in closed-door hearings, where a member of the Judiciary Committee, myself, wasn't even able to ask one single question of a fact witness. The whole thing's been rigged, been unfair. In the process that you had set forth, you made sure that the president didn't have any right to have his counsel there until Judiciary, but by then it was too late. It was too late, because there was no fact witnesses allowed in Judiciary. So I couldn't even ask a question, nor could the president. This is the most partisan impeachment in the history of the United States. Not one Republican voted for it in Judiciary Committee, not one Republican voted for it in Rules, and not one Republican, I don't think, is going to vote for it here today. Madam Speaker, this is a sad day. I believe the Democrats are tearing this country apart. They're tearing families apart. May God continue to bless all of you. May God continue to bless the President of the United States. And may God continue to bless our great nation. And I yield back.
Members are reminded to direct their comments to the chair. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, if Republicans want to defend the President's indefensible behavior, they can do so. But I would urge my colleagues to stand up for the Constitution and to stand up for this country and our democracy. At this point, I'd like to yield 1.5 minutes to the gentleman from California, a distinguished member of the Rules Committee, Mr. DeSagne.
Gentleman's recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to take a minute to thank the leadership of the Rules Committee, Mr. McGovern and Mr. Cole, for our civility last night. Although it was a long hearing and we are very much in disagreement, I felt proud to be part of that hearing, and I really want to recognize both the ranking member and the chair. The previous speaker is part of that Rules Committee, and I would just say that the passion that she demonstrated in her comments, I can't say how much I completely disagree with her, which is a statement on the environment we find ourselves in, and I unfortunately agree with some of her comments, but where the responsibility is, I would put at the White House and the President. He is the divisive one. He is not trying to heal our wounds. The reality and urgency of this moment cannot be more consequential to the American democracy. This is not a hypothetical. President Trump violated the law and solicited foreign interference in our election. At the same time, objective experts have overwhelming evidence that Russia interfered in the 2016 election and is actively engaged in undermining the 2020 elections. Our vote today and the Senate's actions on impeachment have very real long-term consequences for American democracy. Where do we go from here if the Senate does not remove him? The President has a pattern of escalating behavior. The day before the special counsel testified to Congress that the Russian government interfered in our election in sweeping and systemic fashion, President Trump made this call. 2 days before that, the President says that Article 2 of the Constitution says that he can do whatever he wants. As Washington warned in his farewell address, foreign interference tampers with domestic factions and misleads public opinion. We must honor the nation that our founders envisioned and impeach this president for violating the law and betraying the American people. I yield back.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to my very good friend, distinguished member of the Armed Services Committee, former member of the Rules Committee, Mr. Byrne of Alabama.
Gentleman's recognized for 2 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise in strong opposition to the rule and the underlying resolution to impeach President Trump. When the framers granted the House the power to impeach, they feared that it would be abused. Today, those fears are realized. In record speed, this majority has assembled hearsay, speculation, and presumptions for the purpose of overturning the 2016 election. We're not here today, days before Christmas, because the majority has assembled a case against President Trump. No, we're here today because the Democrat majority believes getting impeachment done now will provide their vulnerable members time to distance themselves from their vote. But I assure you, Madam Speaker, the American people are watching. Many of my colleagues have, from day one, rejected the people's choice of President Trump. But another president will come along more to the majority's liking. Our actions here today will be remembered and will set the standard. The second article of impeachment seeks to remove President Trump for failure to produce certain requested witnesses and documents. But as the majority knows, every president in history has asserted executive privilege. The House has a legal avenue to challenge the president, the courts. But the majority has skipped this step, showing that this is about impeachment as fast as possible, however possible. Most of my friends on the other side of the aisle had no problem backing President Obama when he stonewalled the House for years to block our quest to find out the truth in the Fast and Furious investigation. That is why I filed an amendment to the resolution rejected by the Rules Committee, saying, based upon the Democratic majority standard, they should have written articles of impeachment against President Obama and Eric Holder. I wish my colleagues would think about the standard being set. I predict that they will very soon regret it, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, a distinguished member of the Rules Committee, Ms. Torres.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, the facts are clear. To quote the USA Today editorial board, Trump used your tax dollars to shake down a vulnerable foreign government to interfere in a U.S. election for his personal benefit. The rule of law is what gives our great country its strength. The rule of law is what separates us from third world countries, where dictators reign for decades on end. The rule of law is what makes us the envy of the world, the place that other countries look to as they grow their own democracies. And it is the rule of law that brings us here today. We never want to see the rule of law deteriorate or rampant corruption take hold. We never want to see the day when future generations flee for refuge in another country, the way that others are seeking refuge in our southern border right now. I urge my colleagues to vote yes. American values and our Constitution are worth fighting for.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to my very good friend, distinguished lady from Indiana, Ms. Lewinsky, also distinguished member of the Ways and Means Committee.
Gentlelady is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today in direct opposition to this rule and in opposition to the divisive bipartisanship that is on display right now in this House of Representatives. It's no secret that Democrats have wanted to impeach President Trump since day one, regardless of any fact. They knew the result they wanted. They just needed time to figure out how to get there. So they began their impeachment inquiry. Behind closed doors, selective leaks instead of transparency, no due process. Once they'd crafted their perfect narrative, they moved on to public hearings. They hoped the American people wouldn't notice that they failed to uncover one piece of evidence to justify impeachment. They failed to make the case for this drastic action, and yet here we are. For the first time in history, a president is on the brink of being impeached with the votes of one single party. But let's be clear about one thing. This impeachment obsession is not about accountability. It's not about justice. It's not even about the Constitution. It's about pure partisan politics at its worst. And you're watching it right here. And the American people see right through this today. They've seen the rigged process. They've seen the lack of transparency and the complete absence of any supporting evidence. They know that Washington's broken. That's why they sent us here, to fix it. But instead, House Democrats are dividing the country and further shaking the people's trust in this Congress. It's a sham impeachment. It's been carried out at the expense of hardworking Americans who just want us to move forward. Madam Speaker, this charade should go no farther. We should stop wasting time. Focus on what keeps our nation moving forward. Helping workers and families thrive. Protecting the safety and security of our country. I urge my colleagues to vote against the rule so we can get back to work for the American people, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from New Mexico, the Assistant Speaker, Mr. Lujan.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, no one came to Congress to impeach a president. We came here to solve the mighty issues that impact the lives of the constituents we pledged to serve. I'm here because too many families in my district still rely on water trucked in from dozens of miles away. I'm here because too many New Mexican children still go to school hungry. I'm here because too many women in New Mexico drive for hours to find a doctor able to care for them. But this moment has found us. We have reached a point in time where our love of country compels action, where our duty to this republic mandates that we do what's right. The president's behavior is so blatantly wrong that ignoring his abuses of power would be abdicating the oath we made to protect this country and uphold our Constitution. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Gentleman's recognized.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. If we defeat the previous question, I will offer an amendment on the rule. The House shall not proceed to consideration of the underlying resolution until 6 conditions are met. All evidence in the possession of Chairman Schiff has been made available to the Judiciary Committee. The Chairman Schiff appeared before the Judiciary Committee to testify to the report that he authored. That all underlying unclassified evidence has been made available to the public. Minority members of the Judiciary Committee have received their right to Minority Hearing Day. Minority witnesses requested by Ranking Member Nunes and Ranking Member Collins are called and allowed to be heard in accordance with H.Res. 660, and subpoenas requested by Ranking Member Nunes and the Intelligence Committee are issued and enforced. Madam Speaker, to be clear, my amendment ensures that the majority does not proceed without providing a fair and equitable and transparent process, one that respects minority rights, one that opens up the investigation to all members of the House, and one that allows Republicans on the Judiciary Committee to examine the most relevant witnesses. Perhaps most crucially, it will allow all members to fully consider the information available to the committee that actually conducted the impeachment investigation, the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. The process the House has followed has been abysmal. It was closed, an unfair process, and did not respect minority rights and did not give the President due process. But we can change that today. If we defeat the previous question, the House will only move forward with a real, thorough, and ultimately fair process that all members can be proud. Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert the text of my amendment in the record, along with extraneous material immediately prior to the vote on the previous question. With that, I urge a no vote on the previous question. And I yield 1 minute to my good friend, gentleman from Georgia, Mr. House.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
I thank my good friend. The majority has thrown almost every allegation imaginable against this president, and yet these articles of impeachment that have been submitted cannot name a single actual crime. After all the drama, the majority has not found a single shred of evidence, only second, third, fourth-hand information, but the facts have remained the same. The transcript speaks for itself. There was no quid pro quo. The Ukrainian government said multiple times they felt no pressure whatsoever. The aid ultimately came, and even Speaker Pelosi said that this whole thing would have compelling, overwhelming bipartisan support. None of those things exist. I urge my colleagues to stand against the rule and the forthcoming articles of impeachment. This is a disgrace and dangerous to America, and I urge a no.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Clark.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, to paraphrase one of our founding mothers, Abigail Adams, a people may let a president fall, yet still remain a people. But if a president lets his people slip from him, he is no longer a president. Just as Abigail Adams warned, Donald Trump has let the people slip from him. He works for himself, not us. He tried to extort a foreign government into investigating a political rival, and he has unlawfully withheld witnesses and evidence. If we want a democracy, today we must stand for the rule of law. A vote to impeach is a vote to remain a government that is of, for, and by the people. It is a vote born of great fear for our future, but also rooted in optimism, that if we stand for the truth, for our Constitution, we can continue to create a country of liberty, justice, and equality for all. I yield the remainder of my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Might I inquire, Madam Speaker, how much time we have remaining?
Gentleman from Oklahoma has 5 1/4 minutes remaining. Gentleman from Massachusetts has 13 1/4 minutes remaining.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I yield 90 seconds to my good friend, the distinguished gentleman from New York, Mr. Zeldin.
Gentleman's recognized for 1.5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And my colleagues on the other side of the aisle throughout this whole process, their allies in the media, they like to say that Republicans only want to talk about process, not substance, even though we continue to talk about substance as well. They declare their facts are uncontested. They just did it again. So just to maybe recap a few for everyone watching at home, as well as my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, hopefully they'll listen. President Zelensky says there was no demand, no pressure, no quid pro quo. Andrei Yermak said on December 10th that their whole story with regards to the December 1st meeting with Ambassador Sondland is completely refuted. We heard from Ambassador Sondland himself, who admitted that he heard from President Trump that he didn't want any quid pro quo, and that he was guessing when he stated otherwise. Ambassador Sondland, that is, said that he was guessing and that no one on the planet had told him otherwise. Ambassador Volker tells us that President Zelensky didn't know that there was a hold on aid on July 25th. He didn't find out until after he read it in Politico on July 29th. The aid got released shortly thereafter, and Ukraine didn't have to do absolutely anything in order to get the hold released. When our colleagues on the other side of the aisle says that the July 25th call transcript says, "Do me a favor," we have to correct it time and again. It says, "Do us a favor." And if you look at that paragraph, it's only about Ukrainians interfering in the 2016 election. Now, if you want to ignore the Charlie op-ed, Chalupa working with the Ukrainian embassy to dig up dirt, the Black Ledger to bring down the Trump campaign, whether it's Avakov's statement or origins of the Steele dossier, these are all examples. Look at Ken Vogel's reporting from January 2017. It is irrefutable. These are all substance. So stop saying that the facts are uncontested. I yield back.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record page 69 of the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence's November 20th open hearing, where Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Laura Cooper testified that the Department of Defense was not able to distribute all of the aid, with $35 million not provided since it was released so late.
Without objection, so ordered.
I also ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a November 18th AP article entitled U.S. Officials Knew of Ukraine's Trump Anxiety.
Without objection, so ordered.
At this point, Madam Speaker, I'm proud to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Kennedy.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Dear Ellie and James, this is a moment that you will read about in your history books. Today, I will vote to impeach the President of the United States. And I want you to know why. He broke our laws. He threatened our security. He abused the highest most sacred office in our land. I want you to know that it does not feel good. I can't stop thinking about the cost to our country. Not just the impeachable offenses, but the collateral damage of a president who uses power like a weapon against his own people, erodes our decency, degrades our dignity. I don't yet know how they will tell the story of this era, but I want to tell you the story of this day. Let the record show that today, justice won, that we did our job, that we kept our word, that we stood our sacred ground. Let the record show that we did not let you down. I love you. Listen to Mom.
Gentleman's
I'll be home
time's
soon.
expired. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm going to reserve my time for the moment.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I'm proud to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lee.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. First of all, let me just say, I taught my children that there are consequences if they broke the law. I am saddened, but I'm not shocked that we are here today considering articles of impeachment against President Trump. I am saddened, but I'm not shocked because of the pattern of corruption we have seen from this president. Yes, I am saddened, but I'm not shocked because this president has routinely shown his disregard of Congress and the rule of law. The facts are not in dispute. The president abused his power, defied the public's trust, and betrayed his oath of office. He undermined our elections by corruptly soliciting foreign interference in our elections to benefit his own future re-election efforts. Then he obstructed Congress every step of the way in an effort to cover it all up. Donald Trump has been and remains a threat to our national security, a clear danger to our democracy, and wholly unfit to serve as President of the United States. We have an obligation to act today to uphold the Constitution, but also to show our children and grandchildren that no one is above the law, and that includes the President of the United States.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I'm happy to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Trahan.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Speaker, today I rise to defend our democracy. In this chamber, we debate the nation's most pressing issues, and often reasonable people can draw different conclusions. But not today. The facts are black and white. President Trump abused the power of his office for personal and political gain, and then he engaged in a cover-up. It is up to us to confront those facts and vote to preserve and protect our democratic republic. This is not a fight I or my colleagues sought out when we ran for Congress, but it is one we pledged when we raised our right hand and swore an oath to defend our Constitution. Anything other than a vote to impeach will be read as a vote endorsing a future president without rules or consequences. And anything goes, no holds barred brand of executive branch authority that will leave us weaker and surely undermine what the framers passed down. We owe it to future generations to transcend personal interests and party loyalty and vote our conscience for what's really at stake here today, the sanctity of our Constitution and the sanctity of our democracy. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I continue to reserve my
Continues
time.
to reserve. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert into the record an October 23rd New York Times article entitled, "Ukraine Knew of Aid Freeze by Early August, Undermining Trump Defense."
Without objection, so ordered.
At this point, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Maryland, Mr. Sarbanes.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Thank the gentleman for yielding. Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of the 2 articles of impeachment against President Trump for abuse of power and obstruction of Congress. Voting to impeach the president is a weighty decision. It is not something you reach for. It's something you are brought to reluctantly when the evidence presented can no longer be denied. In this sober and historic moment, members of Congress are called upon to uphold our oath of office and our duty to the Constitution. Today, we answer that call. The President's actions compromise the national security of the United States, undermined the integrity of our democratic process, and betrayed the trust of the American people. In soliciting foreign interference, President Trump took direct aim at the heart of our democracy. The American people should decide our elections, not a foreign country. As long as the President continues to invite foreign interference into our democracy, the integrity of the 2020 election remains at risk. The question is, will Congress allow the President to place his personal interests above those of his country? I urge my colleagues in the House to join me in answering that question with a resounding no, because no one, not even the President of the United States, is above the law. I yield back.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record an October 9 Politico magazine article entitled, "This is what a legitimate anti-corruption effort in Ukraine would look like," which explains that legitimate requests are made through the DOJ's Office of International Affairs and pursuant to the United States Mutual Legal Assistance Treaty.
Without objection, so ordered.
At this point, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Castro.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
The President abused his power. He violated his oath of office. He sought to elevate himself as a dictator, a king. But we are not a monarchy. We are the United States of America. We are a republic, a democracy, where the executive does not have absolute power. America was founded on a system of checks and balances. When the President withheld military aid to vulnerable Ukraine and pressed for a personal favor to manufacture dirt against a political opponent, he went too far. He undermined America's national security. He sought to sabotage our elections. He elevated his personal interest over the interest of America. Then he tried to cover up his scandalous behavior, and he obstructed the investigation. He violated his oath of office, but I intend to uphold mine to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States of America. The President must be impeached today. I yield back.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a December 5th Boston Globe editorial entitled "Impeach the President."
Without objection.
And I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a December 11th USA Today editorial entitled "Impeach President Trump. The President's Ukraine shakedown and stonewalling are too serious for the House to ignore."
Without objection.
At this point, I'd like to yield 1 minute to the gentlewoman from Florida, Ms. Wasserman Schultz.
Gentlelady is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, throughout this process, I listened as a member of the House Oversight Committee to career diplomats testify in depositions and found myself contemplating the gravity of this decision. One of my daughters asked then how I'd make my decision about impeachment. I told her that when her future children learn about President Trump's impeachment, they may ask, "Mommy, what did Grandma do?" I want my daughter to be able to tell her children, "Grandma did the right thing, because in America, no one is above the law." With his conduct around Ukraine, President Trump corruptly abused his power for his own interests at direct odds with our national welfare and our Constitution. This president put his interests before those of this nation. Left unchecked, he'd do it again, and had said so. The actions and ongoing schemes that led us to this moment are severe threats to our national security and democracy that we cannot defend or dismiss. With history watching, I must fulfill my constitutional duty and vote to impeach this president. His corrupt conduct and assault on our Constitution leave no other choice. I yield back.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from California, Mr. Khanna.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today, the House is voting to affirm a conservative principle. What makes America the strongest and most prosperous nation in the world is our reverence for the rule of law. It is our love of the law that protects our freedoms, our private property, our families from the exercise of arbitrary power. The real threat to American leadership in the 21st century is internal decline. We choose not to stand idly by while we see the corrupting of our body politic with an attitude that might makes right, that winners don't have to follow the rules. In voting to impeach, we remember Lincoln's Lyceum Address. Let every American, every lover of liberty, every well-wisher to his posterity swear by the blood of the Revolution never to violate in the least particular the laws of this country, and never to tolerate their violation by other. Let it be taught in schools and seminaries and in colleges. Let it be written in primers, spelling books, and in almanacs. Let it be preached from the pulpit, proclaimed in legislative halls, and enforced in the courts of justice. And in short, let it become the political religion of the nation.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I continue to reserve. Just to advise through the chair, my friend, I'm waiting for an additional speaker, but we reserve our time at the present.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record a December 17th CNN article entitled, "Fact Check, Trump's Wild Letter to Pelosi is Filled with False and Misleading Claims."
Without objection.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Butterfield.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
I thank the gentleman. Madam Speaker, I rise on this solemn occasion as we, the House of Representatives, exercise the power given to us by the United States Constitution. The original Constitution was flawed in some respects, but with respect to presidential misconduct, it was unmistakable. The framers knew that presidents could be corrupt or abusive with their power, and so impeachment was written into our organic law. Since taking office nearly 3 years ago, President Trump has consistently and intentionally divided this country. He has consistently encouraged foreign actors to interfere in our elections. He has thumbed his nose, Madam Speaker, at the legislative branch. Enough is enough. We must protect our Constitution, our democracy. I will vote today to prefer serious charges against President Trump and deliver the charges to the Senate for trial, a place where President Trump can defend himself and attempt, if he chooses, to convince the Senate and the American people that his conduct does not violate the Constitution. I thank the gentleman. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I yield 1 minute to my good friend, distinguished combat veteran for our country, Mr. Baird of Indiana.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, today marks a sad day for America. Instead of getting to work to solve the issues of our time, the House Democrats have decided to try to discredit President Trump and the undue results of the 2016 election. The facts here are clear. The President did not commit any crimes. He did not break any laws, and there was no quid pro quo. This has been a secretive, misdirected process from the very beginning, and the American people see right through it. I look forward to voting against this impeachment charade and getting back to work to support the efforts of President Trump to continue growing our economy, creating jobs, and improving the lives of all Americans. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Boyle.
Gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, this is the fourth impeachment proceeding against an American president, and the most serious. The president committed numerous crimes threatening the national security. Ultimately, the matter before us today is not a question of fact, for the evidence is undisputed, nor is it a question of law, as the Constitution is clear. The heart of the matter is this: will members of this House have the courage to choose fidelity to the Constitution over loyalty to their political party? For the sake of our Constitution and our country, for Americans today and tomorrow, I urge all members to summon the courage to uphold the rule of law and vote yes. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I continue to reserve my time.
Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Madam Speaker, I yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Clay.
Gentleman's recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to hold Donald John Trump accountable for his repeated abuse of power, his deliberate obstruction of the House's constitutionally mandated oversight responsibilities, and his unprecedented misuse of the presidency to weaken the separation of powers and subvert our Constitution by dangling $391 million in congressionally appropriated tax dollars over the head of an embattled ally in order to coerce a fraudulent investigation into a potential political opponent. Our founders feared a lawless, amoral president would willfully put national security at risk for his own personal gain. In 1974, Republicans made it clear that their ultimate loyalty was not to one man, but to upholding the Constitution. Today, the uncontested evidence shows Donald Trump violated his oath of office. My friends on both sides of the aisle can either defend him or defend the Constitution. History will not permit you to do both. I yield back.
Gentleman from Oklahoma continues to reserve.
I do, Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Can I inquire of the gentleman how many more speakers he has?
I'm prepared to close when my friend is.
I'm prepared to close.
Gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized to close.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I yield myself the balance of my time.
Recognized.
Madam Speaker, before I begin my formal remarks in closing, I want to say one thing for the record. I have great respect for all my friends on the other side of the aisle, and I am sure they're voting their convictions. So when I vote mine, please don't imply I'm doing it for my political party. I'm doing it because it's what I believe is right. And I do believe I can defend both the President and the Constitution of the United States, and I think that's exactly what I am doing. Madam Speaker, I cannot oppose this rule strongly enough. The process we saw leading up to it today was a complete charade. It was a closed process, an unfair process, and a rushed process, and it could only have ever had one logical, predetermined ending. Throughout it all, the majority trampled on minority rights. They refused to call witnesses with relevant firsthand knowledge. They relied on hearsay news reports to make their case. They denied Republicans the right to hold a minority hearing day, and they refused the President of the United States his due process rights in the committee that was actually conducting the impeachment process and investigating him. And in the end, what was the result? Articles of impeachment based on an event that never happened, a purported quid pro quo that did not exist, aid that was allegedly withheld that in reality was never withheld at all, and a narrative of intent based on nothing more than fantasy. Madam Speaker, we deserve better than this. Impeachment is the most consequential act the House of Representatives can undertake. It must not and cannot be based on a flawed process. It cannot come at the expense of minority rights or due process to the accused. It cannot be based on a vendetta against the President that the majority has pursued since the day it was elected. And it cannot be based on nothing more than spin and hearsay. I oppose this rule, and I oppose the flawed and unfair process. Madam Speaker, it's a very solemn vote that all of us will cast. I want to end by, number one, thanking my good friend, the chairman of the Rules Committee, for conducting the kind of hearing he conducted yesterday. But I also want to underscore again, we are very violently opposed to the process, very strongly opposed to the rule, think this is a charade and been very unfair. So, Madam Speaker, I urge my colleagues to vote no on the previous question, no on the rule, no on the underlying measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from Massachusetts.
I yield myself the remaining time.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Speaker, let me thank my friend Mr. Cole for his kind words, and I appreciate his leadership in the Rules Committee and the fact that he respects this institution. But Madam Speaker, let me say again what happened here. The President withheld congressionally approved military aid to a country under siege to extract a personal political favor. That's a cold, hard fact. The question before us comes down to this. Should a president be allowed to ask a foreign nation to interfere in an American election? You know, I remember my first political experience as a middle schooler in 1972, leaving leaflets at the homes of potential voters urging them to support George McGovern for president. No relation, by the way. I remember what an honor it was to ask people to support him, even though I was too young to vote myself, and what a privilege it was later in life to ask voters for their support in my own campaigns. I've been part of winning campaigns, and I've been part of losing ones too. People I thought would be great presidents, like Senator McGovern, were never given that chance. Make no mistake, I was disappointed, but I accepted it. I would take losing an election any day of the week when the American people render that verdict. But I will never be okay if other nations decide our leaders for us. And the President of the United States is rolling out the welcome mat for that kind of foreign interference. To my Republican friends, imagine any Democratic president sitting in the Oval Office, President Obama, President Clinton, any of them. Would your answer here still be the same? No one should be allowed to use the powers of the presidency to undermine our elections, period. This isn't about siding with your team. I didn't swear an oath to defend a political party. I took an oath to uphold the Constitution of the United States of America. And when I vote yes on this rule and the underlying articles, my conscience will be clear. I ask all of my colleagues to search their souls before casting their votes. I ask them all to stand up for our democracy, to stand up for our Constitution. Madam Speaker, I urge a yes vote on the rule and the previous question. I yield back the balance of my time, and I move the previous question on the resolution.
The question is on order in the previous question on the resolution. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. In the opinion of the chair, the ayes have it.
Madam Speaker.
Gentleman from Oklahoma.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. On that, I would request the yeas and nays.
The yeas and nays are requested. Those favoring a vote by the yeas and nays will rise. A sufficient number having risen, the yeas and nays are ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. Pursuant to Clause 9 of Rule 20, the chair will reduce to 5 minutes the minimum time for any electronic vote on the question of adoption of the resolution. This will be a 15-minute vote.
The leaders of the House Rules Committee have just wrapped up debate on the rules that will govern general debate on the articles of impeachment against President Trump. So this first vote is what's called a previous question vote. This is really, some call it a vote to have a vote, but you may have heard Tom Cole, the ranking member on the Rules Committee, talking about 6 items they would like to see included in the rule. 15-minute vote here. The next vote will be the vote on the rule itself. And we expect general debate to start shortly thereafter. Some 6 hours are scheduled. It could be longer because of delaying tactics, but we're expecting a vote sometime between 6:30 and 7:30 Eastern this evening. As this vote is underway, we're opening up our phone lines to hear from you on the process, debate you've heard so far. 202-748-8921 is the line for Republicans. Democrats use 202-748-8920, and independents and all others 202-748-8922. There was some anticipation that perhaps we'd see another delay vote here. Manu Raju of CNN, though, quotes Adam Schiff, reporting that Adam Schiff told members today that Republicans said they would limit the number of procedural objections in exchange for an extra hour of debate. So we are seeing, or will be seeing, if the rule passes, 6 hours of debate today. We did see during that hour of general debate a couple of efforts by Republicans to bring up issues. Jason Smith of Missouri raised the issue of calling for 12 hours of debate. Liz Cheney, the conference chair, raising a concern, a unanimous consent request that members be asked to stand and vote. The votes in the House are recorded electronically. We don't see it because the cameras don't show it. The electronic tally board above the dais there in the U.S. House. Now, C-SPAN requested from House leaders that we be able to put an additional camera in there, and that request was turned down. We can tell you that all of the votes in the House, no matter what day it is, are always available online in our Congressional Chronicle. And particularly today, on this day that the House will vote on the 2 articles of impeachment, we point you in the direction of our impeachment page, cspan.org/impeachment. We'll get to your calls momentarily, but to let you know what they'll be voting on, the rules setting the parameters for debate, here's the clerk this morning reading those rules.
Madam Speaker, by direction of the Committee on Rules, I call up House Resolution 767 and ask for its immediate consideration.
Support the resolution.
House Calendar Number 63, House Resolution 767. Resolved that immediately upon adoption of this resolution, without intervention of any point of order, the House shall proceed to the consideration of the House of the resolution, House Resolution 755, impeaching Donald John Trump, President of the United States, for high crimes and misdemeanors. The amendment in the nature of a substitute recommended by the Committee on the Judiciary, now printed in the resolution, shall be considered as adopted. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the resolution as amended to adoption without intervening motion or demand for division of the question, except as follows. A. The resolution as amended shall be debatable for 6 hours, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary or their respective designees. B. The question of adoption of the resolution as amended shall be divided between the two articles. Section 2. During consideration of House Resolution 755, only the following persons shall be admitted to the hall of the House or rooms leading thereto. A. Members of Congress. B. The delegates and the resident commissioner. C. The President and Vice President of the United States. D. Other persons as designated by the Speaker. Section 3. After adoption of House Resolution 755, it shall be in order without intervention of any point of order to consider in the House a resolution appointing and authorizing managers for the impeachment trial of Donald John Trump, President of the United States, if offered by the chair of the Committee on the Judiciary or his designee. The previous question shall be considered as ordered on the resolution to adoption without intervening motion or demand for division of the question, except 10 minutes of debate, equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on the Judiciary.
Un son qui résonne dans vos tympans, le son pur